Hello and welcome to the podcast, The Way of the Sensitive. I'm your host, Cara Wild. This is a podcast for those of us who feel called to live in a different way, to create a new society where diversity and uniqueness is celebrated, not shamed. We're the channels of the light, co-creating a heaven on earth upon this beautiful planet. We're here to live and achieve our soul's goals in this lifetime. To us, it's not woo, it's real. Calling all the magic makers, the mystics, the empaths, the sensitives, the starseeds, the artistic, autistic ones, sometimes sidelined, sometimes scapegoated, but we know that we're here to create new pathways in the one mind, because it's not just about traversing alternative dimensions, it's also about landing and being fully alive in this gorgeous world. Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the podcast, the first podcast of 2018. I cannot believe it that this is the first podcast, and I wanted to say something about that because I don't know about you, I'm beginning to recognise that my new year and my engines don't rev up until February. I am not out of the slumber of the deep dark earth and the inner work in January. So this calendar new year does not work for me, darling. I'm so beyond that. So I was still doing a lot of inner work in January, and now it feels like my engines are beginning to rev and things are taking off and goals are getting achieved. And on social media, we can do the comparisonitis and think that we should, have achieved a million things by now. So just in case you're like me, I think those of us that start our goals in February are just in touch with the divine, darling. So welcome to the club. So that aside, hello. Today we talk about a subject that's very close to my heart. Our guest is Harris Hill, and they advocate and support people in their transgender journey. Some of you know that this is a topic that is very close to my heart because I've been helping my daughter transition from identifying as a boy to a girl over the last year. And that's been a radical journey as a parent. Scary, fascinating, wonderful, celebratory, such a teaching child. So I kind of got Harris on this podcast for selfish reasons initially, and what I love about Harris is their ability to educate without shaming, because I think most of you, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to celebrate uniqueness, you want to support diversity, you're the ultimate feminist, which is the expression of a soul's uniqueness in physical reality. And this area can be tricky to navigate. We don't know what we don't know. And we are in a society at the moment where things to do with privilege and oppression are timely, sensitive, feel volcanic. Like if you say the one wrong thing, things are going to erupt at the moment. And we need more people like Harris, I believe, to gently nudge us in the right direction, to be willing to share their own journey, which they do quite openly, to talk about people's needs with sensitivity, with an incredible amount of knowledge. So whether you think that you are touched by this or not, if you're a member of our society, this affects you too. And we talk about the language, pronouns, what everything means, how an individual's journey in their transgender their identification is very unique to them, but there are certain things that we can be aware of that can help support somebody more effectively and more sensitively. We talk about the difference between gender and sexuality. We talk about how that we've got an identity outside of gender, and the fluidity of spiritual oneness comes up in our conversation. We talk about how this topic relates to being seen as a soul first and a body next, And then we also get really practical on the do's and don'ts and the 3 questions that you can ask if you're wanting to support a peer, a work colleague, a fellow student, a friend, and really importantly, a staff member in speaking out and express their true gender that they identify with in their life, at work, and how you can best support that and how we can best support this as a society going forward. So lots and lots of really interesting conversation topics that don't just relate to transgender but also relate to what really is radical self-acceptance and self-expression, and hopefully living in a society where that is embraced more and more. And on a personal note, if there are any parents out there that are struggling with this or just becoming aware of this, please do feel free to reach out to me at cara@carawild.com. I'm lucky that I have got children that are very knowledgeable and that have taught me all I know, so I can, I come across as this parent that kind of, I think I'm pulling it off, I'm not sure, but we seem to be doing okay, and it's my kids and following the lead of my kids that's really got me here. So we're all in it together as parents, so please do reach out. And I'm sure that Harris feels the same. There are links in the show notes to Harris's website and some more information for you. So enjoy the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of The Way of the Sensitive. And this is the first podcast interview that I've done this year. So I'm really, really pleased to welcome Harris Hill to the podcast. Welcome, Harris.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. So as I said on the introduction, we're going to be talking about issues around transgender today. And I wanted to just kind of, before I introduce Harris at all, I just kind of wanted to say why this was important on the podcast. I think it's a really important issue in our society anyway, but also those of us that are sensitive or empaths or resonate with my work tend to be on the leading edge. And that's partly because we're here to create new ways of being and new ways of experiencing the world, whether that's through our empath skills or through kindness or, our differences, like our uniqueness is what is important. So there's that issue. And then obviously some people know that this is an issue close to my heart because I've supported my daughter through her journey into the correct gender identification for her and not the one that she was assigned at birth. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes out today and what conversation we end up having. So Harris, I know we talked a little bit about what you sharing some of your own journey, and then hopefully people that might be curious about their own gender identity can maybe use that as a bit of a starting place.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to start off by saying that it's different for everybody. Some people know right from day dot, even as a toddler, they really feel a strong sense of their gender, and they're very aware that it's different to, as you say, what they were assigned at birth. But then there are also lots of adults as well who, they might not find out. I know of one lady who didn't realise that she was a lady or didn't have the confidence to come out until she was in her 70s or 80s. So
wow.
there's no wrong age to find out. But obviously the younger the better, the less damage is done, and the more, as you say, it's so important to be ourselves and to be happy. And I think I'm about to turn 30, so I'm sort of in that.
Wow, I thought you were a lot younger than that.
Thanks. But I think I only realised in my 20s, and I'm sort of part of the generation where I'm not so old yet that this is a massive upheaval, but it's still more than a lot of young people who are coming out now, you know, in primary school.
Yeah, my daughter's 11.
Yeah, so I know as a toddler I was just thought it was weird that I kept being referred to as a girl. And you know, nursery school, even when they were like, you know, girls that go over there. And I was like, oh, they mean me. So even then I had to kind of train myself to realize that's what people were talking about and that they meant me, but it never really fit. And I think I always had this niggling feeling growing up, although it wasn't enormous, that a lot of the things people said about girls, I mean, it was offensive in the first place, you know, girls can't do that and they can't do this, but also I kept thinking, like, I don't really understand why these things are relevant to me, and it just didn't resonate at all. And then I remember it was like the night before my 18th birthday, and I thought, you know, legally from tomorrow I would be known as a woman, and it just sounded, even saying it out loud now, it just feels, it's like my skin gets tight and I can't, it just feels horrible.
That's an interesting metaphor. Yeah.
So it's like wearing shoes that are too small, or it's just, yeah, I really didn't like it. But I just thought, well, maybe it's just because of my age and it's something that I'll grow into and it will feel right eventually. And it just never did. And it was about 4 years ago, I came across some random post on Facebook and it used a word that I didn't know. And so I looked it up and it introduced me to this whole, you know, like a long list of words that I've never come across before. And the non-binary community, so that's anyone who doesn't neatly fit into the man or woman box, you could say you're non-binary. And it just instantly, I remember I was sat at my last job when I was last employed, it was some time ago now, and I was staring at the computer screen and I felt my face flush really hot, you know, as if, I don't know, maybe like, I wasn't embarrassed, but I don't know, it was just like coming home. I was staring at these words on the screen that explained perfectly how I felt.
Right.
And I told some friends, like my two close friends at the time, I emailed them straight away. And one of them said, I thought everyone felt like that. And the other one said, yeah, that's probably me a bit as well. So I thought that was funny. No, neither of them in all that time have said that their gender is anything different. But for me, it's grown over time.
Right.
And at the beginning, I was then thinking about name changes, and I realised that my name had never felt right to say out loud. And for, I don't know, maybe for like the first year and a half, or maybe the first year, I felt that all I needed to do was change my name and let everyone close to me know who I was, and I felt that would be enough for me. But it was about after that sort of first year, I then started to look at myself when I was dressing, and I'd always been very body positive when I was younger and made a commitment to be kind to myself about how I looked and encourage other people to be kind about themselves as well. So it was a strange contrast for me to be then putting clothes on that I was more and more enjoying, because I used to conform a lot and sort of try dresses on, and I got lots of positive feedback, so I kind of abandoned those, and I was putting on these sort of new clothes that I liked and looking at myself thinking I just don't look right to myself. And it took about a year and a half in, I realised that transitioning physically was something that I needed to think about, and I was you know, really scared about that. And actually it took me another, I don't know, nearly another 18 months to pluck up the courage to go to my GP and ask for a referral. And the waiting list is very long, and I guess that's a blessing for some and not for others. But now that the time is getting close, so I've been on the waiting list for nearly a year, it's starting to make sense a lot more now. But when I was younger, when I was in my teens, I came out as bisexual. I don't use that label for me anymore because doesn't quite capture my experience. But I thought that coming out about my gender would be the same thing, where you just say, "Oh, I'm such and such, by the way," and that would be it. But it's not at all. It's like it's years of undoing, and kind of rewriting your history, and with those that you have your life with, and learning and questioning everything you thought about yourself through that lens over your lifetime so far, and kind of working out which bits were right and which bits actually you've just done out of habit and isn't true.
So that must just be like going through different layers of authenticity, which I think we all do.
Yeah.
Because we all conform in some way. It's just probably not as dramatic as when you conform from a gender point of view. But yeah, unpicking all of that conditioning is a really important part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a long process, and actually it's partly why I want to do what I'm doing and educate people and help them to have those conversations, because going through that kind of thing, surrounded by people who may, love and support you, but they don't have enough of a grounding to be able to have that conversation with you without you then having to educate them at the same time, it can be very isolating. So I'm lucky to be surrounded by a lot of people who are very open-minded, very progressive and supportive. But even in those conversations, to try and explain how you feel using words and concepts that they might not have come across before, you're kind of educating at the same, when really what you need is emotional support and understanding, where the understanding bit is already done. Then you can get to the emotional support part, and that's very difficult. And I think that's often where people struggle in their relationships, because they're frustrated and they're isolated, and they themselves are feeling possibly that they're already quite misunderstood, and they're already a bit freaked out maybe, or really struggling day to day. Then attempt to have those conversations and find themselves faced again with a lack of understanding, even if it's coming from a very loving person, and that's very hard. And also for the person listening who wants to support, and they're trying their hardest, but I think it's often a place where these very important relationships in our lives break down, because you've got the one person who's already struggling and needs help, and then you've got the other person who wants to help but hasn't had much of an introduction before. So,
well, I was just gonna, looking back on my daughter's journey, and I have asked her for permission before I've started saying any of this on the podcast as well. I've just spoken to her about it the other day, and I can see this journey now. I can see that she was trying out different things, and it was just like, it was nail varnish to start off with, and then makeup, and going outside and getting challenged by friends, and coming back in and touching base with me, and I'd support her and she'd go out. And I just were thinking it was just like never for 1 minute considered it to be a gender identity thing. And then both of my children started to talk about this community and this whole other, I had no idea, like so ignorant, so ignorant. And they started educating me. And then Ayla started saying, I feel like I'm a girl, not a boy. And as a parent, it was terrifying, rich, exhilarating. It was just all of it, and wanting to do the right thing for her, researching and, doing all of that. And we were lucky she was having cranial, because she was telling everybody. Everybody she came into contact with, I'm transgender, and we were seeing a cranial sacral therapist regularly at the time, and she mentioned the shamanic aspect of it, like the fluidity, and that just really clicked something for me. like there's a couple of things I want to mention before I ask you some questions, but that the fluidity of, like, she's definitely an empath and she can morph through one thing to another, and that really helped me to understand gender identity. But then also one of the freest things were, I have tried shopping for that child for years and really struggled to think of something that would really light her up. And we went clothes shopping, and it was just at the beginning of the journey, so we were still automatically taking her to the boys section, and she's just like, oh, these are so boring. And I said to her, oh, we're in the wrong place, we need to be in the women's. Went downstairs and she just lit up, and that's it. It feels like she's just found herself and come home. So I wondered if you would be able to kind of talk about the difference between gender and sexuality, because that's the bit that really was key for me to understand.
Well, it's my opinion that actually the only reason we have discussions about sexuality is because there's this idea that our gender, or how we're assigned at birth, kind of then dictates like some sort of default. So for example, it's the default that if you're assigned female at birth, that it's expected that you will, unless you say otherwise, that you'll grow up to like men and, you know, be in a heterosexual relationship. So we've then had to, as a society, come up with labels to say, actually, I'm not the default, and, you know, I don't care what gender my partner might be, or I'm gay or whatever. So sexuality is much more about who you're potentially attracted to in terms of gender, or, you know, that kind of thing. And then, but your gender identity, I feel, is much more, you know, it's who you are on the inside, regardless of whether you're dating somebody or not. It's, you know, I guess it depends on your school of thought, but I know some people talk about sort of masculine and feminine energies, but I don't even think that cuts it, because I know lots of very effeminate men who are straight and very women who are straight. I think this idea that there's any kind of formula to it, or that there's any way that we can predict these things without having these icky conversations where we have to ask people. You know, I think people feel comfortable thinking that there's a formula, or there's like a consensus as to what is the average. And actually, it's an experience. I think it's just something that you feel innately, or you don't, despite trying. I mean, you look at, you know, terrible things like conversion therapy, and even the people who are involved in that all admit that it doesn't generally work. I think the same goes for your gender, you know, who you feel you are, or who you're attracted to. It just kind of is what it is. And I like the fact that we've got to a point now in our sort of evolution where we're starting to chill out about it a bit more and make space for people as they are.
And I think you've really caught something that's key there about, like, if we don't have these labels, you know, then we have to ask more questions, or it's like, without those boundaries that can be barriers, we have to be more vulnerable with each other. So we can't make assumptions, and we can't just automatically decide once those boundaries get more blurred. And, you know, if you can link that with the idea of journeying into oneness, which is like the spiritual path, but still claiming a sense of identity, but that identity can be fluid. Like, it's even starting to show, like, outside of gender issues, but the fact that people are having a lot more different jobs. You're not just in a job for life, you're changing identities all the time. We're outgrowing relationships a lot quicker than we used to, because we're all growing and changing identities. So the fact that we can it'd be interesting to see if we get to a point where we're just okay as a society with people just having the choice to be whatever identity they choose to be, and just hopping from one identity to another, whether that's to do with gender or work or sexual preference or whatever it is. But it is uncomfortable. I have am I getting the terminology right? And have I offended somebody? And it's just like being in that really vulnerable place of like, well, I might do, and that's okay. And we can be kind with each other around that.
Yeah, definitely. I do think a lot in terms of sort of social evolution, and I wonder the same if we'll get to a point where actually we don't need a lot of those definitions, because it just is what it is, and you like who you like, and everyone respects that and each other, and there's no kind of demand, and it's a bit more relaxed. I'm not anti labels, by the way.
Yeah, it can be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think if it's your own label and it's something you've chosen and it's something that's helped you to find community, it's something, words are so important, because if you can describe how you feel and say, look, you have those labels and I used to, but actually they don't fit me, like a pair of shoes or whatever, then it's important to be able to say that out loud. And I think there are lots of people who almost want to skip this awkward part of explaining and getting into the details because they find it uncomfortable. But actually, when we're kind of exiting or on our way transitioning out of this society where, being straight, being cisgender, i.e. not transgender, had that's all been the norm, we're now in a period of time where we're needing to have those words to sort of say, look, I'm not part of the old way of doing things, and I deserve to be talked about and part of the conversation as well. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. I was like, will we be rid of that in my lifetime? Will I get to a point where nobody needs to say it, and it is what it is, and nobody needs that definition? But I don't know. It might be a bit premature to hope for something like that. But.
Yeah, well, and thinking about that, I mean, in my own personal journey as a parent, and I mean, I've got the most awesome kids when it comes to stuff like this. But I had no idea. I'm like, right, so hold on a minute, I'm cisgendered, okay, and so there's atypical and there's non-binary, and then I kept going back and saying, and then what's this, and then what's that. And yesterday as well, I'm relatively newly single again. I've just come out of a 7-year relationship, and my eldest said to me yesterday, the reason why you might have failed at 2 relationships, Mum, is, and he was trying so hard to help me, and he was saying, maybe you need to expand your horizons a bit and see whether it's because you are interested in other genders, and whether you are bisexual and stuff. And I'm just like, that's supposed to be the other way around. It's just like, well, that's really cool. So I mean, do you think it's helpful to go through some of the labels, like as you were, for anybody who's listening? Do you think that'd be a helpful thing to do now?
Yeah, sure. We'll just stick to a few, so I don't want to overwhelm.
Yeah.
So transgender, the current most popular kind of front of the movement definition is that transgender simply means that you were identified incorrectly at birth, that you were given a label that was wrong. So you might have been assigned male at birth, but actually you could be non-binary, you could be actually a woman after all. So it just means that the label was wrong. It doesn't have to mean that you were assigned one and then you're actually the opposite or anything like that. Cisgender means that the midwife got it right. They assigned you the correct one. So it's kind of the opposite to transgender. I would mention as well that there are plenty of people out there who were incorrectly identified as a girl or a boy at birth, but they might still choose not to use the term transgender, because even in my own support group for agendered people, that's people who don't feel that they have any ties to gender at all. We often have discussions about what it means to us, and there's a whole group of us who do identify transgender, and then a whole group who don't at all. And I just, it's really interesting how it's, you know, even within a group that has a very specific label, we still have very varied experiences. So it's like you said earlier, it's best not to assume. Like, transgender is an umbrella term, but you might come across people who still don't use it, even though they could, you know, have rights to use it. So we've covered cisgender, transgender, and non-binary is just simply anyone who doesn't fit into the binary, the system of two, of men or women. So that could be someone who experiences no gender, like me. I'm agender. It could be somebody who's gender fluid, whose sort of identity sort of fluctuates between different things. That could be, there's people who call themselves demi boys or demi girls, and they often describe their experience as something akin to like a very kind of young, not quite, like, not fully blossomed experience of being a boy or a girl, but it's like a hint, like you know, it's partly there, but it's not fully there. And one more, you can get someone who's bigender, so they experience two simultaneously. It's different from being gender fluid, which is like a constantly changing thing. Bigender is much more where you're experiencing the two energies at the same time.
Okay.
So
I can't get my head around that.
No. It's not, I have to say, like, it's not, I don't get all of these things on a kind of emotional level at all, but it's just to understand the word. And also a lot of them are, if you're into sort of etymology, you know, words and how they're put together, you can work out most of it, I think, just from, and also you can Google things. Like, I would say that more importantly than anything is getting people's pronouns right.
Yeah. Oh God, I got corrected on that a lot, which I needed. It was like, it's not easy, you know, like, I mean, I've got a relatively easy deal, and we've got, you know, a group of friends, their son identifies as male now, but I was just like saying things and I'd be hearing she. But yeah, okay, so why would you say that is the most important thing? I think it's a bit of a no-brainer, but I would like to hear your perspective on it.
Well, I think really it's just like, in a world where it's difficult to be, you know, part of my community and, you know, your daughter's community, it so often happens that people are using the wrong words, you know, quite innocently, a lot of the time. And actually that can really, you know, one incident is not necessarily the worst thing, but when it's something that has been kind of pinned on you from a young age, and then everybody you've met for years has kind of been reinforcing this incorrect thing over and over again, it's I mean, it can be damaging, and that's often why some people in my position are very reactive, because really it's kind of like a form of PTSD, that you've kind of been denied your identity and not seen as you, and treated, you know, you've not been seen for such a long time, that can be very difficult. So just to call someone the right pronouns, you might be the only person in that person's day who correctly addresses, you know, your friend or your family member, your colleague or whatever. And that can make a massive difference. I mean, not to bring the tone down too much, but I think it's 1 in 5 1 in 2 young trans people will try and take their own lives.
Yeah.
You know, I know some people, you know, there's that old saying, sticks and stones, but words are so important, and actually they influence how our brain develops and how we feel. And there's, you know, as you and your followers already know, words carry energy, and you know, the energy in what people say can be damaging.
And feeling unseen and unheard is well, I mean, that's one of the biggest forms of emotional abuse, and you know, just not being seen and not being heard. So if you're constantly being referred to something that you don't see as you, that you just don't get seen, you don't get heard, do you? And I know, I mean, I'm going to put some links as well, but I read up on it lots because I wanted to make sure that it was like, I don't know how to say this without, I wanted to make sure that it was a choice for and not a choice against something. From like you know, my background in counselling and understanding that it wasn't a rejection of something but more an embracing of an authentic choice. And maybe we could do another interview that might go into that a bit deeper, because some childhood experiences, I'm sure, could influence a rejection of a certain gender. And then everything that I read was about, you know, the best thing that you can do is to just encourage and support the change. And I think that is incredibly important. And I know that you wanted to talk about the do's and don'ts of something, you know, if you, somebody at work or a friend or at school, don't even get me started on some of the kids conversations and toilets. That's another like nightmare of an area, and doctors and all that kind of thing. So yeah, what's your do's and don'ts?
So there's a few things, and I want to just preface this by saying that nobody's in trouble and nobody's going to get a bad report home to their parents. But this is just more of an opportunity to just explain some of the terminology and how we're talking about things, and how we can improve those conversations. And the first one that I want to start with is something that has been used for some years to explain the transgender experience, but actually it's not quite, it's starting to become a little bit outdated, and it invalidates a lot of people. So I think it's important to talk about, and that is the phrase "born in the wrong body." Because and obviously there are plenty of people out there who say that that is definitely the right phrase for them, which is fine, and I'm not taking away from that at all. However, there are lots of trans people out there who might change their appearance in terms of how they dress and how they groom themselves, maybe. But even then, that might be it. You know, a lot of people are not necessarily looking to go down the sort of hormones or surgeries route, and that's, you know, and that's okay as well. And also, it kind of, using the term "born in the wrong body," especially with young people, can really encourage them to feel that there's something shameful about how they look, or that they need to change their body when actually they might not do otherwise. So it kind of gives people the opportunity to find out how they really feel, and is this just a social change rather than a medical one?
Yeah.
And also, I don't want to end up pressuring people to change something that they wouldn't have done anyway, because it's a huge process to go through, which is different for everybody. And I mean, there are lots of trans people out there who might only choose to just have hormones and not have any surgery, or maybe one kind of surgery but nothing else. And I think to allow people the space that they need to discover those things without adding on the pressure that their body is somehow wrong, is massively important. Not to mention that for obvious reasons, like, you know, certain surgeries will render that person infertile, which again is not necessarily a reason to stop someone doing those things. But if at some point that person wants to biologically have children themselves at some point, we don't want to kind of hurry and put pressure on that person to make such a big decision, but at the same time we don't want to encourage them not to, because I've had that a lot, you know, in me wanting to go down the medical route myself a little bit. I've had a lot of people say that they're concerned about my reproductive capabilities when they've not even asked me if I want to have children. So it's a fine line, and I think it's better to ask somebody, therefore, if they experience dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not, as I said before, this isn't something that every trans person experiences, but dysphoria, and also dysphoria is not thinking that you're unattractive. It's much more, the phenomena if somebody's lost a limb, maybe in a war or through an accident or whatever, the brain is still mapped to think that the limb still exists.
Yes.
And the suggestion is that with dysphoria, it's a very similar mechanism where the brain is mapped a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look down, you're going, well, that's not ours. Or where's such and such? Because that was supposed to happen.
Right.
So it's often where the neurological mapping of the brain doesn't match the physical sort of, your limbs and everything else.
Wow. Yeah.
Similar idea.
Right. That's a really useful way of thinking about it.
Yeah. So actually it's less of an identity thing in the case of dysphoria, and more of a neurological thing.
Yeah.
And obviously you can have an identity like a transgender identity but not have any dysphoria, because the two things are not necessarily, it's not mutually exclusive. So
yeah,
that's an important thing to know. And one other don't that I'll mention is we're still in our language getting used to using the term transgender or agender or whatever, and it's important to understand that these words are adjectives, and that they should never be used as a standalone noun. So for example, it's better to say a transgender person rather than a transgender, because
oh crikey, that's powerful.
So if you think about it, you're kind of just seeing them as this one aspect, and this isn't the same as like I can't remember what it's called, doesn't matter. If you think about it, I know this is not necessarily like the best example to use, but just to drive the point home, you wouldn't call somebody a disabled or an ethnicity or whatever. You would call a disabled person.
Yeah.
Same. I'm not suggesting that being trans is anything like being disabled, but it's just to give you an example of the language
and how powerful it is for people that can feel like society doesn't already see them because their needs aren't getting met, that to then lose the person bit of it is like, that's a double whammy.
Definitely. It's really important. So I don't want anyone to berate themselves for these things, but just to have these conversations and to know how to use these words and that would lead me into actually one more thing on the don't side, which is if somebody comes out to you, they're not saying that they want to be a girl or a boy, they're saying they are one. And I think we need to get over this idea that we're all, us included, there's this idea that we're all biological machines first and identity second. And I don't think that helps actually anybody, trans or not. And actually the moment that we stop seeing ourselves in that way, I think it can only be a good thing. Identity happens between your ears, it's not between, it's not in your pants. So
so that's like seeing the soul first before
and I think
the way it's housed.
Definitely. And I think that for me is very powerful, that we start to see each other as souls and individuals. And I don't understand why that's such a controversial thing to say in so many circles. People don't like that idea. They want to deal with biology and what machine are you in, and I think it's quite bizarre. I think it's strange. There's this joke in the trans community that goes around a lot in different various forms, where someone's saying, well, what are you? And they say, well, I'm an experience, and they say, but what's in your pants? And it's very, people make all sorts of jokes. And there was one that was saying, what's in your pants? And the person rummages in their pocket and they go, I am a paperclip, a pen pants.
I mean, from a potential, like any part of a culture that helps to birth something like this, there's, you know, the labour pains can be incredibly challenging, and the potential is extremely exciting. I mean, I can feel like it's really moving, you know, and I think it's got brilliant potential. We can be really enriched with it, you know, and for those of us that are cisgendered, and like, I say this playfully, but cisgendered heterosexual, I'm a bit outdated, you know, I'm a bit stone agey. Even that kind of, you know, just being surrounded by these new concepts is making me think about other areas of my life as well, and just making me think about how unflexible or rigid I can be thinking about other things. So I think, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think actually once we get comfortable with this, it, as you say, it bleeds into every area. So there was the 3 tips that I was going to give, or the do's.
Yes.
Which I will cover quickly. So these are 3 questions that you can ask somebody if they've just come out to you, or it's obvious that you're worried about using the wrong words or the wrong terminology. So the first one is asking somebody, what are your pronouns? So if you want to be called she, they, he, and there are some other newer ones like Z and things like that. But don't worry too much. The fact that you've asked tells that person that you're a safe person and that you care more about their well-being and being that support in their day-to-day than you care about your own discomfort. And it is uncomfortable to try new things. So that's a really positive,
brilliantly describes,
really positive thing that you can do. The second thing that you could ask is, how can I include you? And that again is massive. It shows that you know you're really willing to hear about how somebody feels, and you really want to make sure that they're as included in those conversations as anybody else. And again, that's really powerful. They're really simple questions, and it's okay to not know what these answers are going to be, but the fact that you even opened these conversations can change somebody's life. It really can. If someone's got nobody supportive in their life except maybe you, that can be enough to really help people to really survive and do well as well. And and don't forget, there are going to be people watching you asking these questions, and it will encourage them to get involved as well, and to give them the tools they need to be inclusive as well. And then the third do is that anytime that someone's come out to you or confided in you, the third question should always be, how far do you want this information to go? Because it is still, unfortunately, in many areas of the world, dangerous for many of us to be out, particularly trans women, and particularly if you're not white. It's very difficult to be out and to be yourself. So the wrong person can hear about it, and things can go badly wrong. Not to mention that's also, just on a personal note, a person might need to tell you because you're a manager or you're their parent or whatever, but they might not be ready to be really out yet. But then the opposite can be true, that person actually might need your help in coming out to other people, and they might be asking really for your support, or for you to help them go shopping, or I don't know, whatever that might be. I know that when I first started shopping in men's sections, because I feel more comfortable in those sorts of clothes, I was terrified, and the first time I ever tried to get some shirts on, I went to the changing room, and I was told the women's changing room is upstairs, and I was devastated.
That I've had that with toilets, with supporting.
And and actually the last time I went shop on a big shop, I went with my mum, who's an image consultant, and she was really, you know, up for it, and just having her there and having her support me, and also it's her job.
Brilliant.
I felt like I had permission, so that was
Yeah.
nice as well. But yeah, just kind of finding out where people are, and how far, you know, this information can go. And also it might be the case that you'll need, as the person who's being confided in, you might also need to find support of your own to learn, so that the onus isn't on your trans friend or family member or colleague to do all of the work for you and to educate you. So it's good to have that conversation and just sort of explain that you're going to be looking into these things. So, you know, how much can you reveal in those conversations, and what is comfortable for your person in terms of how much you can say or not say. Like you were saying, you ask your daughter a lot, like, is this okay to say? And that's really big in acknowledging people's boundaries and supporting them in exactly what they need.
So I mean, there's the privacy and security, but basically those powerful questions that you just talked about are basically, how can this person be seen? It's about seen, belonging and connection, which is what it means to be healthy human. You know, that's kind of what we're all wanting and what we're all after. So I could talk to you forever, and I'm serious about getting you back on soon. I think you do a wonderful job of presenting this information powerfully and sensitively. So it's like an advocate for your community, for want of a better phrase, but also in a way that's not judgmental and going to create barriers for people that are wanting to learn. And I think you do an incredible job of doing that. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
So for people, there's two things. So for people that are either, I can think of two different audiences that we might have. People that are starting to think, actually, this is sounding quite interesting. Where would you suggest that they start? You know, you mentioned a group. Could they find you in a group? And also, I know of a few people that might be listening from a employer point of view that are thinking, how can I support my employees in this? So have you got any contacts? I mean, I'll put them in the links of the show notes as well, but anything just come to mind?
Yeah, so there are two things that I do personally, and I have a little startup with a friend called Marvelous Moi.
Oh, I've just seen that on Facebook. Yeah.
And this is very new, and we're still in the early phases, but the idea for this is that it helps people in their transition and to find community, because at the moment we're kind of peppered around, and there's not, you know, I don't know lots of trans people socially, so, you know, somewhere we can make friends and understand each other, and we don't have to, you know, go through all that stuff and have that subtext that you can only enjoy with somebody who's on the same page as you. So I'm setting up a community for that. So that's marvelousmoi.co.uk.
Okay.
And we're on Facebook as well, and I will be setting up a community group for that this week. So you can find the page on there on Facebook, and I will put out a link this week to the new group. And then from an employer's point of view, I have a company which is not very old, called Genderworks, and that's at genderworks.co. And this is concentrating a lot on educating people and training people to know how to speak to colleagues and to think about what their needs might be, and to think about things like policies and wording. And it's not just for colleagues as well. It can be, think about marketing. Is your marketing gender specific? And if it is, are you sure that you're being inclusive? You think of the Always ads on TV for sanitary products, and they talk about there being 3.5 billion women in the world, which is not correct. And the fact that it's only aimed at cisgender women. Not to mention that there are lots of women out there who don't have periods, either because they have differing, realities with their fertility, maybe they're transgender, it's all thinking about those things. And we are reaching a point now where we want to be authentic, but also to have credibility in our areas.
And that's that whole kind of privilege thing as well that we really need to think about.
Yes, definitely. And also, I think from the people that I've spoken to so far, there's a lot of emphasis on sending trans colleagues to HR. And I know that some companies do have a kind of inclusivity, like training and things, but I'm not, from what I've heard so far, even the companies that do this, and it's great that it is becoming a thing, of course, but even so, I from what I've heard, the culture is not really updating in the way that we really need it to. And I think that's a massive thing. If you know that every time that you've got an issue, you can only go to HR, and that actually it's not like a team attitude and a team priority, actually it's not. It would be better to, I think, to go further than that and really improve the working situation for everybody, and most of all with managers and directors, because change has to come from the top down, as we know. And directors and managers are not comfortable. It's not setting the precedent that we need.
No, when they set the unconscious culture, don't they? You can have all the policies you want, but it's just you live and breathe it as a manager. It's absolutely got to be.
So to get the people at the top, sorted, and to provide them actually space to learn all of the words and all of those things where it's unpressured and not in front of all of their staff. To be able to air how they really feel and what their blocks are and all that kind of thing it's massive.
A real leadership skill, isn't it? All that it was anti-oppressive practice at one. It's all part of that same area, I guess. Right. Well, I will put those in the show notes, and I'll also put some stuff around for parents as well, for advocating for their kids, and information that I found useful. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks for doing that. Just good luck with your company.
Thank you very much. I really love the fact that this all the shamanic stuff that you do and the energy things, and I think it ties together really well, because you're about making the world better and getting everyone to connect with their the real deep stuff, and I think it's important what you do as well.
Thank you.
I'm really pleased.
Thank you. Okay, well, take care.
And you.
Bye.